This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Whenever I leave the house with my camera, I try and set myself a little goal, like a mini photography assignment. Sometimes that might look like photographing X number of dogs, or it might be trying to work with color contrast, or it could be trying to fill the frame with a group of people. Depending on your style of photography, these little photo assignments might look completely different. So say if you're into more photojournalistic photography, you might want to regularly photograph the construction of a new building over the time that it's being built. Or if you're someone who's into abstract photography, you might want to shoot from the same vantage point through the same reflection maybe at different times of day with different lighting and at different times of year to document how one area can change through one perspective. For me, doing this puts an end to the endlessness of photography. So each time I return from a photo walk, I've achieved something and I have something to show for it. Be honest for a minute. Whenever you get a new camera, have you ever read the instruction manual? I'm pretty sure I speak for most of us that that thing goes unread and lives in the box forever. Rather than learning the camera before we start using it, photographers as creatives, we just enjoy putting it to use and figuring it out as we go. We'll learn a little bit of advice from other photographers who have the same piece of kit, but for the most part, we learn it as we need each feature. This might get you 90% of the way there to taking great photos, but there's an extra 10% we really need to work on. Look, I hate reading instruction manuals as much as you do, but I actually have a couple of photography instruction manuals that I think are seriously worth your time and better value than most pieces of gear you're going to buy this year. The first is this Masters of Photography book. It's How I Make Photographs by Joel Marowitz. This book isn't very long, but it goes over many simple, to-the-point pieces of photography advice. It's very simple and easy to pick up whenever you find yourself in a photography rut. Joel Marowitz is arguably one of the best to ever do it in both black and white and colour, so I highly recommend picking up this one. The second, which I have on my Kindle, which is perpetually out of charge, is Matt Stewart's Think Like a Street Photographer. This book conveniently does what it says on the tin, and when you're reading it as a street photographer, it feels like he's speaking from your own subconscious. And it makes you realise just how much all of us have in common when we're out there trying to make photos. Again, it's super short and it applies to anyone regardless of what you're shooting or where you're shooting. It's very helpful to get into that photography mindset. I'll drop links to both of these books in the description below. To go one step further, you can book a workshop with one of your favourite photographers. Be warned, these might be quite expensive. Some photographers will charge more than a new camera body, but the value you'll get from one workshop with them will make your images far better on a worse camera than that new camera you're considering buying. Outside of getting a one-on-one workshop with these photographers, one of the best places to learn skills like this from talented street photographers is this video sponsor, Skillshare. I've been really enjoying this Skillshare class with Andre D. Wagner on street and documentary photography. If you find this video useful, I highly recommend checking out this class. Andre is an amazing photographer with many valuable insights on street photography. Whether you're learning the basics of exposure with your first camera, acquiring new street photography skills, or improving your editing know-how in Lightroom, Skillshare has the exact classes you need to develop your skills all in one place. As we near the end of 2024, it's a good time to reflect on the areas we could improve on in our photography practice. So as we plan for 2025, now is a great time to learn and refine our skills to start the new year strong. Get started with Skillshare today. The first 500 people to use the link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial to Skillshare, so jump on that deal now and don't miss out. I don't know about you, but I don't know if my photography style has actually changed since I first picked up a camera. I feel like whatever I learned in that first period of time has kind of stuck. And unless I push myself to try something new, very little changes in my style of photography. When we're talking about style here, I don't necessarily mean just the final image that you're delivering. I think much more about the style of how you shoot on the street. Are you more of the quiet observer, shooting from a distance, waiting for subjects to enter the frame? Or are you the person who's always on the move, shooting fairly wide, and shooting first, thinking later? If you are that distant observer and that is your comfortable style, instead try shooting a little bit wider and moving a little bit quicker and playing with different heights. Sometimes it's fun to look at the world on the street from a lower height So shoot with a wider focal length and don't be afraid to crouch down or use your screen on your camera when shooting from lower angles. Contrary to that, if you're used to shooting on 28 or 35, moving pretty quickly, try go up to something like a 50 or an 85 and be a little bit more patient and try to compose the perfect frame. That's something that I really need to try and do more often. I always find it's easy to change how we shoot when we're shooting somewhere different, when we're in a new place with new culture, with new colours and nice light. It's very easy to suddenly start shooting in a completely different way. But when you're shooting in the same city all the time, which can be quite monochrome and grey, you can find yourself falling into the same habits, shooting the same images again and again. So use this challenge of intentionally shooting in a different style to try and look at your usual surroundings from a new perspective. Do you fall into the trap of going out for a photography walk and you end up covering like the largest distance possible, like crossing your city and maybe doing a funny squiggly line in the process, only to come back with maybe a handful of images, but nothing really to write home about? When I first moved to Manchester, I found this happening to me all the time. That is, until I discovered this process of looping during a photography workshop in London. Looping in street photography looks something like this, and I'm going to use Google Maps to demonstrate this. Rather than walking miles from one side of my city to the other, instead I can loop a smaller area that I'm already familiar with. You'll notice that this particular loop is more of a dodgy looking figure of 8, and that's because these are some of the main areas that I like to hit on my photo walks. Looping an area is really useful for lining up subjects with their environment or with other subjects that either contrast or complement your primary subject. In a city like Manchester, people are typically wandering the same little areas, so if you spot someone wearing bold colours on your loop, and you know they could work with a different part of the environment later, likely if you continue doing that loop, they're going to arrive there and line up for an image. For me, this process makes me pay a lot more attention, and it also makes me much more patient, because I'm not thinking I either have to get the image now or I don't get it. I can have a go at an image one time, and then if I see that subject again, I can try and get something else later. Once you've learned an area and you loop it several times over several weeks, you start to notice the hotspots, where the pedestrian traffic is coming from and what direction they're moving in. So you can kind of get into a flow much easier at the start of any of your photo walks. Wait a sec, I have something I wanted to say, but I'm trying to remember which. So shoot with the right brain, edit with the left. Opposite to what I expected. The right side of your brain is responsible for creativity, while the left side is responsible for critical thinking. When we shoot with the right brain, this translates to shooting freely, to shooting anything and everything, not being afraid to shoot those terrible images, because in shooting terrible images, a great image can sometimes appear. Do not be precious with your shots. Even if you're shooting film, you've made the decision to shoot film. You just spend that money, it's fine. But if you're shooting on digital, you have no excuse not to be shooting as much as possible. You can always go back and delete a few hundred shots that just didn't work at all, but you can never go back in time and take a photo which you missed when it happened. Sometimes a moment that feels like nothing when you shoot it can sometimes reveal a lot more in itself when you get it back into the edit. And the same can happen for those great photos. You think it's great in camera, only to be wildly unimpressed with it when you get it back into the edit. What was I thinking? Remember to sign up to Skillshare using the link in the description below to get a 1-month free trial, and to check out Andre D. Wagner's class on street and documentary photography. You won't regret it.